So today we're going to do the first part of the brain. There you go, look at that. The questions are already here. Now I have to do a lot of reading, I realize that. I'm thinking that wasn't the smartest thing, writing so much. But we're going to do the first portion today, and then the second portion of the brain is on Monday. And then Wednesday, we're into the next chapter, which will be the spinal cord. Okay. Which will be 9 questions, a few concept questions, but not 20. The next one is a hard one again.
That's for Wednesday then.
That'll be a week from today.
Okay.
So you don't have to do none of these quizzes things until Monday if you don't want to.
Oh, perfect.
Because then Wednesday's the next class, so you can do it from Monday to Wednesday.
But we won't be able to do it over the weekend if we want.
Yeah, I'm going to try to open it soon.
Okay.
I'm almost done with it. Yeah. I'm trying to catch up.
Yeah.
All right? So I know it was a lot of quiz, it was a lot of work. We also had Monday off, so that was fun. So you had a lot of time, of course. Filled for not school stuff. I know. So, let's do the brain. Before we reach into the brain and dissect it, let's talk a little bit more about pathways. As we did. Is this the first question? Yeah, it is. As we discussed, the brain receives sensory stimuli that tell it what's going on, both inside and outside the body. It then continually interprets all those impulses and comes up with appropriate responses and reactions. So that makes sense? You receive stuff. Oh, somebody stepped on my toe. Your brain feels that somebody stepped on your toe. And brain says, what are we going to do about this? Well, we pull the toe away so we don't get stepped on anymore. So that's what that means. So the appropriate response or reaction. Oh no, this is the jerk. So let's do this one too, because this is funny. Driving down the freeway, suddenly some jerk cuts you off and you have to maneuver out of the way, almost having an accident. Think of all the information the brain receives. It needs to process extremely fast in order to potentially not perish. So you've got to swerve out. So you've got to have information coming in to the brain before you can swerve out. It's not automated, and the brain has to process it. Your hands and feet sure needs to react very quickly. Those motor outputs go straight from the brain to the skeletal muscles. So we're talking here about motor outputs. These are the stimuli that go to the body from the brain to have a reaction in the body. Then later on, if you wait a little bit with the accident, you get a sudden jitter. And I use that a lot of times to explain how the sympathetic nervous system, how the endocrine system is involved, and how fast an endocrine response works that goes through the bloodstream as compared to a nervous response. The swerving out of the way is the nervous response. The getting the jittery coffee feeling is the endocrine response. It's a little bit delayed, but it lasts for much longer. So that's a nice place where you can feel the physiology between a nervous system and an endocrine system, how it works, in terms of speed. That's the adrenaline, which is a hormone, that's sort of blah, 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 blah. Around the system. But match the function of the appropriate part of the efferent division of the nervous system. Oh, look at that. So let's just go right to the picture a little bit. So the first part, no, this is the picture. See this picture? This graph? Mm-hmm. This graph is really good. This graph is going to get you to buy it too. This is fun. This is about all you need for that level. That's why I put it up there. Get you through the higher classes.
Oh.
This piece of knowledge. Yeah, I try to establish so you're ready for the Bio 20AB or the Bio 2/Bio 4 classes, which is the upper divisions, anatomy, physiology. So that's why sometimes it feels like we're going deep, which we are, but I think it's very beneficial, at least it has shown that over time, and that's why the test material is very limited. You make sure you focus on what I ask you for the test on, not everything. Okay. Different than other classes. So, when we need to match, what match is the somatic nervous system? Oh, we did this one. Somatic nervous system conducts a conscious impulse to the skeletal muscles. That is correct. When you see soma Soma means body, psychosomatic illness. You've heard of that? Soma means body. When we look at that and this in the body, the most things we touch in the body when we touch the body is muscle stuff. So when you talk about the somatic nervous system, we're pretty much talking skeletal muscle stuff. Conscious, you're thinking you want to walk, you go walk. The autonomic nervous system, which is that?
It's the conducts and
The unconsciousness, right? So that autonomic, automatic. You don't think about it, that means unconscious. And then when you look at the unconscious, the autonomic,
yes.
we have two extremes, two divisions they call them. One is the sympathetic and one is the parasympathetic. What is the sympathetic division promoting? Emergency. So when it's the sympathetic nervous system, you're thinking of the lion in the corner, you got to run away or fight it. Or the bear.
Is it like that fight or flight?
That fight or flight. You either fight something or you run away. We're going to have a chapter on that, we go a little bit into that. The parasympathetic nervous system is the other extreme. That's a non-emergency. That's the rest and digest. That's the turkey dinner. Yeah, no. Just sit there and fall asleep. Promotes non-emergency. Good. Yeah, these are kind of hard, huh?
Yes.
As described in the last chapter, the brain is very delicate, requires super protection. The skull is like a football helmet. Did you see the 49er game?
So happy they lost.
That's a video. Ooh. No, that was good. And I'm not even a football fan. The skull is like a football helmet. Underneath, we have multiple membranes that help cushion the brain. The outer one feels like tough leather. It holds everything together. So when you have layers you always an outside layer of a shell is always a tough one that anchors it to the outside, different organs or here to the skull. And then when we go deeper, we have in the brain one that is more delicate and has tiny little finger-like projections that reach internally, touching the innermost membrane, which is very thin and lays right on the brain. On Monday, hopefully, we will dissect the sheep brain. So you'll see the most inner layer, thin membrane that just as here is like in a brain that makes it shiny looking.
You said Monday, right?
Monday.
Friday.
Well, you're not going to come?
Oh, no, I think. And we're going to try to look at it.
No. Well, we can look at a human brain.
Okay.
Yeah, we can go get a human brain and look at it. But the sheep brain is definitely better to dissect. And collective, so the second membrane is this finger-like projection. Let me find a picture for it. So we have the skull, then we got this tough membrane here, and then we got a thinner one that has these little things going down. These little finger-like projections, and then they're gluing them, they go right to the one that attaches right on the brain. That's the innermost membrane. Okay? So the collective, these finger-like projections softly hold the brain in place like an army of little springs to preventing excessive movement. Can you see that when you look at the... This here all are basically little springs. They kind of bounce a little bit to make sure the brain doesn't slam against the skull. Or also what's really bad, talk about football, is that it actually rips it, pulls it off. But if you have a whiplash or a concussion and your head hits something really hard, the inside, keeps moving. And that creates a lot of damage here. So on one side, it pulls on it and it damages this stuff, and then it pushes on it, also damages stuff. I think the pulling is now understood to be more damaging, but I'm not totally sure about that. So this is pretty cool. Then we have a watery substance that we have described briefly in the last chapter, the cerebral spinal fluid that then surrounds the brain and is in that space where those little finger-like projections are in. And that takes effectively 97% of the weight off the brain's gravity. So the gravity is reduced by 97%. So that's like you're floating in the water. The brain always floats in water. This way the brain is protected from shock and gravity. Would you also like to be held like that? Of course you would. So what's the dura mater? This one?
Yeah.
The thick one, the letter. The brain, the periosteum, yeah, that's part of the skull.
Yeah.
The periosteum is a membrane on the skull, or on any bone, for that matter. What's the arachnoid motor do? Septum, good, good. Septum going deep in, that's those little finger-like projection things. And then the pia motor? Sensitive. Very sensitive. There you go, so that's good. You got that? Yes, Stephanie.
So, like, if there's swelling in the brain, does that just mean, like, one of those spaces has just, like, completely full with the brain? Because I thought the brain really doesn't grow any bigger or get, like...
Yeah, but you can only imagine if you have swelling in the brain,
Yeah.
and you got this thing pushing against the skull, what are you going to do?
So, like, I know they have to put, like... a-
They're going to make a freaking hole in the skull
Yeah.
to take the pressure off.
Yeah, so, like, those, I thought that's what's supposed to prevent the swelling in the brain.
Well, yeah, he does a job, but I mean, I had one student, she came in and she's like, dude, my dad's in the hospital in Atlanta, they took his skull cap off to take the pressure off. And I'm like, whoa, okay. That was a long time ago, I didn't hear about that before. But yeah, you got infection, inflammation, big problem in the brain. Enclosed space, meningitis.
So it gets into those lungs, fluid levels.
Well, these are called the meninges. Meningitis is inflammation in here.
Oh.
That's where the word comes from.
So that's where it gets getting into those layers right there. Oh.
That's why you got the blood-brain barrier. Which after the lecture we need to look at these other questions from the last one because I want to double check. Because I went back and I think some of the spellings you told me should have been correct. Well, you know, I have to lay all the right answers behind it, so it's it takes me a while to figure out which all the difference are. So anyway, but that's the meningitis, that's meninges, that's the protection of the brain. It's very delicate. If you have this, if you have an epidural in childbirth, very infrequently, but it can happen. You poke, the dura mater goes all the way down to the coccyx, and it anchors down into there. So it's attached here. It's also attached here. So, huh?
That's cheating.
What's cheap? Oh, the epidural. Well, don't worry. Some people get. I can't take. I'm a guy. I can't have babies, so I can't say nothing. It's like I had a pregnant lady today, and she's like, "It's really getting hard." I'm like, "Yeah, don't you like the guys when they say we are pregnant?" I'm like, who's carrying them? My first wife said after we got she gave birth to our first daughter. We walked out of the hospital. Says, "I carried her for 9 months. Now it's your turn." And it was great because I had a sling and it was nice. We went cross country skiing with the baby here.
And if that men could have babies, none of us would be here.
If only men could have babies, none of them would be here. Well, you know. Anyway, that goes to a whole other section of this conference. We don't need to touch on it right now. Oh, is that coming up? Oh, look, the baby. The nervous system starts developing in an embryo within 3 weeks of being conceived. That's early. At that point, but you got to think, who's going to organize what's going where? Who's going to coordinate everything? What? Uh-oh, am I going to get it? At that point, we were kind of like a flat leaf with a stem going up its middle. That's kind of a visual. It took me a long time to figure out that visual. But that's how, so first we're flat. So that's like a leaf. That's the side, that's the stem going up and down. So the leaf is this way. And then in the middle, it goes down and invaginates a little bit, that leaf, and that becomes the stem, and then that becomes the neural tube, that becomes the brain and spinal cord in the baby. And then it just got to grow and push around and do its magic. But it's got to be the first 3D organ that kind of does a lot of the work because you got to organize what's going on. Okay. Anyway, central link structure folds in itself, becomes the neural tube. Will ultimately grow the spinal cord, and the brain is on top of it. The brain grows heavily in early life. At what age does it pretty much reach its full weight?
5 to 7.
5 to 7. Good. That's why early life is so important. Engage with your children. Anyway. That's right here, so that's good. So let's go to the next topic here. If we look at the brain from the outside, it looks like a ball wiggles and grooves with the stem coming out at the bottom. Yeah, it's like you got the, isn't that pretty? I know, you wish that on the test. The wiggles and the grooves, and then you got a deep groove in the middle here, separating it from left to right. In the outer area is where the most neural cell bodies are located. So the brain is interesting the way it's organized. It has this shell on the outside, and that's where the cell bodies are. And then in the center, if I can take it apart, in the center here, there is mostly nerve fibers that carry the information up and down, which kind of makes sense. You don't want the cell bodies all just here, and then here are the fibers. Who are they going to connect with? So the most of the cell bodies on the outside shell, the cortex, they call that, and then the fibers travel towards the inside, down, up and down the spinal cord, brain and spinal cord. Internally is pathways for impulses sent along. The fibers, as they're also called, have myelin, which is fatty, which stains a little different. So the myelin is a staining question. We'll talk about that in a minute, I think. Remember them, they insulate the nerves and they make the pathways go faster. They also make sure the other nerves don't touch each other so they don't electrocute each other, sort of thing, across that. But the fatty stuff looks a little bit like white, and that's why we call that part of the brain the white matter. And the other one, the cell bodies, doesn't look white. How do they look?
Gray.
Gray, so we call that the gray matter. As simple as that. You got that one wrong? Well, when we get to the spinal cord, it's the reverse. The gray matter cell bodies on the inside and the white matter is on the outside. It's all a matter of electricity. You have to think what makes sense when you have to lay down the cables. And so gray matter is cell bodies and white matter is cables.
Is what?
Cables. Nerves. Axons, essentially. Collection of axons, which is what nerves are. And the white is because it's the insulation. The myelination is the insulation. And it's white because it's fatty. And fat looks white. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Looking at the brain again from the outside makes us appreciate that there is, deep grooves or fissures. A deep groove or a fissure separating the brain from right to left. So that's actually what I just did here. So when you take the brain, it's interesting, it's kind of like two things. You're going to take a brain and you can reach down in the middle. This is really dead. When you take the sheep brain, you can reach your fingers down all the way to this white structure. You didn't know that, huh? Yeah. So these are hemispheres. They call them hemispheres, and they're slightly different when it comes to the thinking. The left lobe is considered to be more logical, and the right considered more creative. That's why people say, I'm not good at maths. I'm not.
Where's the hemispheres in the brain? Where?
This and this. 1, 2. Mm-hmm. But what we now understand a little better is that the one side is involved in more overview thinking, and the other one more detailed thinking. So the logical is more detailed thinking, the other one is more overview thinking, creative. Like, what should we do? And then you start coming with ideas, and then you got to do it. It's more like that versus, and they have to work together. I think one of the things that the scientists don't like about this, logical and creative thinking is that means they don't work together. They work together as a unit. And so we have to nurture both sides. And this, I'm not good at math, just doesn't fly. Although I'm not good at languages, so maybe it does fly a little bit. I heard of patients with stroke, and so that's also interesting. I heard of patients with strokes in an area that we call the Broca's area. So on the left side, that's where we make language, where we speak. And they often get, in a stroke, it often gets injured, and the people don't have that anymore. But what they did is they have language come back a little bit when their family sings childhood songs to these people. And so you got Broca's area here, and then you can stimulate the same side on the other side, and that brings language back a little bit, because this side is not damaged if the stroke is on this side. And so they start stimulating other centers, the similar centers in the opposite hemisphere, and they get some of that function back. And that's kind of cool. I mean, if it's a matter of being able to communicate a little or not at all, that's a big deal. And so that was nice. That wasn't even a doctor figured it out. That was a nurse. So it's because the sides are mirrored in the brain. And the other thing that you realize, that we're going to talk about what is in the brain, but the brain is very neuroplastic. So if you don't see, part of your brain is taken, the seeing part of our brain is taken up with tactile information stuff in a blind's brain. So their tactile abilities are like they got eyes in the finger in comparison to us. And so that's why it's like, well, a blind person doesn't necessarily just all I want in life is see again. Because they might not be able to because of that. And potentially they also don't miss anything because they never potentially had the sight. So we have to be I feel like I have to be very careful, what I project into somebody. But that's kind of cool how we can see how neuroplastic the brain is. Okay, let's go back to this. Here it is. Since the two hemispheres are largely separated from one another, what we have is we have pathways that go from neuron in the same hemisphere to another neuron, but we also have pathways that go from one hemisphere to the other hemisphere. They travel across. And then we got pathways that come from the brain down the spinal cord and back up. And so what do we call pathways or fibers that connect the two hemispheres together? Commissural fibers, correct. I know, and what I need to add on that, I did get a question from somebody. I don't remember who it was, 282 number. I know, you have to put names behind the numbers. The commissural fibers go from, see, this is pretty nice the way it's done. So this is a hemisphere, and this is a hemisphere. So these are all the fibers within the hemispheres. We call them association fibers. Same side, same hemisphere. Then we have fibers that go across. And we call those the commissural fibers. And then we have fibers that go up and down. You're going to talk to the body. We call those projection fibers.
So what are the projection fibers, where do they?
Go up and down the spinal cord to the brain. The commissural fibers are the funny one for us, because there's this one here, and I mentioned in the video, sure. The main one here is called the corpus callosum, which I should put in as an answer for that question. But it's not. It's an afterthought. Well, I can't change it. That one I can't change after, so I have to just give you guys the credit.
That got me confused in the video. This got me confused.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, because I felt like I wasn't sure it was the correct explanation in the video for what was.
What is?
Yeah.
So I'll review it.
Okay.
See if I made an oopsie. It's hard not to make an oopsie, man. I listen to these videos, I'm like, oh my God,
So you just.
my language is horrible.
So you said the association is same side.
So association is same side. Commissural is hemisphere to hemisphere.
Across.
And projection is to the brain to spine.
Okay.
And so the one that we always laugh about is the corpus callosum, which is the one from side to side. And apparently is the reason why the woman's like, guy's useless, can't multitask. And the guy is like way overwhelmed, can't handle more than one task. Because apparently, and there's some people dispute it and some don't, but apparently in males the corpus callosum is much smaller than in women. It makes sense. And so the good news is, you can keep saying that, and the good news is also I can say, it's not my fault. And so it's just thrown down. And I don't know evolutionary what the reason is. I mean, we often talk about, that in evolution the guys had to be the hunters and go and target one thing and be very direct and very precise and just, it's life or death is one thing. And the females was, if we don't want to be transphobic, gender problematic, but just generally speaking, more in taking care of the family, the housing, the cooking, it's just multitasking. It's much more multitasking. And they often say that's why in these days, if you read Men Are From Mars and Women From Venus, I think in that book, where they talk about that the mom, the woman, has much more ability to pick up things that are not going so right. And the guy is completely oblivious about that and thinks, oh, she's just nagging. And if you don't, then nothing happens, right? And the guys just do that, stereotypically speaking. But it's kind of interesting to think a little bit, because it's not a blame question, it's just an understanding question. Well, if you're 20, it might be a blame question. If you're 50, you're trying to figure it out. At least hopefully. All right, anyway, that's for that. So I will review that video part.
Yeah, I mean, you made it remind us.
Oh, I don't take credit for that. So now we're gonna go a little bit more specific. We have five different lobes in the brain. We have 5 functional lobes in the brain, with 4 of them are named after skull plates. What are they? What's the part in the front called? Frontal part. So it's a frontal lobe. What about the one there by the side? What would you call that? Yeah, there you go, parietal lobe. What about the one by the ear? Then what about the one by the back? Great, so you got those. Yeah. And then we got another one.
That's the one that's hidden on
The hidden one. Well, see, the problem is you got this head, this cup, you got this brain. People want to become smarter, like evolutionary speaking. And so as humans apparently, as humans got together in groups, their energy needed to change. Their muscle didn't need to be so strong because they're stronger in group in numbers. But that energy from the muscle was taken and was able to be put to the brain. And so the brains keep growing. And so we keep thinking more. And it's very interesting. And so there wasn't enough room, so the brain had to wiggle around and squeeze and get squeezed. And then there is this little squiggle here that got created. And that's the other lobe that's hidden. And what do we call that lobe? The insula, the island lobe.
Is that this?
Hmm?
Is that this right here?
Nope.
Where is it?
When you pull on the side here, you pull the yellow one down. That's what they did. They pulled the yellow one, here's blue. They pull that down, and behind that is another lobe, and that's the insula. When you take the brain off and the front off, you see here there is the pink and the yellow, they go on the inside, and they have a little space here. That's the insula. The folding over. It's the folding over portion. Yeah, let me see if there's a better. No, it's hard. It's. I should find a picture where you slice it like this, where you can see it on the inside. But what they did here is they just pushed it down. Here you see the arrow. They pushed it down to visualize the insula.
So is it on the left side?
Both.
Both sides.
It's both sides. Yeah, you have these on both. Well, you have one frontal. No, you have both because you have 2 hemispheres. Duh. And the bones. That was a tricky question. The frontal lobe is concerned with sending motor commands to the body. All other lobes have more sensory or integrative functions. Let's say you want to walk. You ever do that? Want to walk. The initiating command is sent to a muscle that comes from the frontal lobe. Actually comes from a very specific area in a frontal lobe called the primary motor cortex, which is where the cell bodies are located that send the impulse to want to work with the muscle, so that motor impulse. And that location is the precentral gyrus, which is the wiggle right in front of the central sulcus, which is just about beneath one's hairline in the forehead. So about here, down in here, there's a wiggle. It's right here. So if you look at the frontal lobe, it's the last one before you get to the purple area. If you look at your brain, it's the red one. The one that has a little red hue on it, a little reddish on it. If you look at the brain here, we look at the frontal lobe, That's the last wiggle of the frontal lobe, is that primary motor cortex. Yeah, that's important. That's where the nerves go and say, like, I want to lift that knee, and it lifts the knee. It's magic. So let's finish that. Where was that? Want to walk? The wiggle in front. The entire body is actually mapped out on a gyrus. So on that precentral gyrus, the whole body is mapped out. When we artificially stimulate an area, a corresponding body part moves. So they do some surgery. They take brain plating off, take a plastic knife and wiggle a little bit. See what moves. I mean, they do it, of course, scientific, but I've seen videos of it. It's pretty interesting. So the frontal lobe is also an area where we think for the brain. So that's where we problem solve. That's why we do this. You know, that's why we want to hold the forehead to bring energy to the forehead. So that's where the thinking. So we solve problems there. We judge situations. And the famous region of the frontal lobe is known as the Broca's area, which we just talked about. What does Broca's area do? Speech creation, right? Good. So the wiggles with that body part mapped out on is, you can see it right here. You see, that's a body a little bit chopped off. It's way creepy, right? There's two of them. There's one for the motor, and there is one for sending information out, and then there's one for where you feel the pain. And so both of those have these, what they call the homunculus. Where is that? Is that somewhere there? Somewhere. I have it probably written down somewhere, no? And this is a claymation of it. So if you make a person that indicates how sensitive an area is, or how much fine motor skill an area needs to have, depending on what it is, the area of that part in the wiggle is bigger because you need more cell bodies for that area to be represented. And so this shows you, this is actually one for the feeling part, the sensation, not the motor. There's a motor and there's a sensor. So you see that thumb is huge. So if you feel something, you can put your hand in a pocket and you feel which coin is it. You put a coin on the back, you can't feel what settle of coin it is. There's way more spread out, those nerves. And we'll talk about that in a minute. That's pretty cool. So let's see where that goes with the homunculus, if I jumped over the next question. The parietal lobe processes incoming information, so sensory information coming from the body, such as touch, temperature, pain. So that travels up from the receptor, from the end where it happens, through the spine, through then a structure on the inside of the brain that we call the thalamus, which we'll talk later about. It's a really cool structure. But then from there, the nerves fibers are sent to the body sensation, to the post-central gyrus. So we talked now about that red wiggle, that's the pre-central gyrus. The central sulcus is this wiggle here that you don't see on a brain just from looking. It has to be marked for us. If you're really good at it, you can find it, of course, but for us. And so that's where the motor commands come from. And then behind that, we have the post-central gyrus, because it's behind, post means behind. And that has the primary somatosensory cortex in it. Is that, listen to that? Primary somatosensory, look at that. Whoa, 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 what's up with all those big words? Soma means body, sensory means you're feeling something. Cortex means it's on top of the wiggle. It's where the nerve cell bodies are, that's the cortex. And so in the parietal lobe, we have a lot of these sensations. So when you feel something like a pain, it travels up the spinal cord, it goes through the inside here, and then it ends up on top here somewhere. Wherever the body part is that gets affected. And then if you have a chronic pain, you get this pain coming in all the time. And let's say your thumb hurts, because I don't know why, but your thumb hurts, and it keeps hurting. At some point, the wiggle here encompasses more area than just the thumb, and your whole hand hurts. And the hand's not even broken. The thumb was broken, not the hand. But the brain doesn't differentiate that, and we call that smudging. It becomes less clear. Chronic pain. Smudging. Like smudging the paint, I guess, is from the word. I know some of these words I should look up before I speak them out. You know? And that's chronic pain. Now the whole hand hurts. Now the whole arm hurts. Then we get into fibromyalgia and all those kind of things and it's not to say, oh, it's only in your brain. It's not only in your brain. I got one case from my ex-mentor and I asked him this question because when the PT start talking about this, I'm worried that all we do is mental exercise for a twisted ankle, and I don't want that. But you know, the tendency is that the physician don't go looking at the problem, but says, oh, it's in the brain again, because it's harder to look at the problem. And my mentor, I said, so is this correct? What are you thinking about this? And he says, no, I had a case, he twisted his ankle so bad, he was on crutches for 65 years, he came to the office, I adjusted him, he was 85 or some stuff, and he walked out without crutches and went back to work. After all this time, because it's just, nobody looked at it like that. Oh yeah, you have cases like that. People walk around for years in problems that are, if you really look at it differently, sometimes it's not that hard to solve some of the stuff. But anyway, smudging. And so how do we then make that more defined again? Less smudging is what we do, is we enhance the information coming in, the input information, via movement. And then more movement data comes into this area and it's going to get more defined again. And so very often you're hurting, the best remedy is to move. And that's for chronic pain and a lot of acute pains also. Even with an acute back pain, for example, it's good to move because movement decreases the pain sensation being traveling into the brain. Also, that's the other thing it does. I think we have a slide on that, the gate theory. It's really cool. Otherwise, we'll talk about it again. Because I realize the MDs don't get that concept. Even now, they are not trained in that concept. So I want everybody to know it. It's so easy. Anyway, so that's the precentral gyrus and then the postcentral gyrus. Oh, look, here it is. Duh. That's the motor. The red is motor. That's how you move things. How fine-tuned you can move things, and that's how fine-tuned you can feel things. And that's that weird-looking thing. Creepy. So now we have this area where we feel the pain, and then we got this whole part of the cortex. What is this part going to do? And so when we look at, we have a primary area, that's where the information is sent first. And that's that post-central gyrus. And then association areas surround them to process the information, help the brain to understand what is meant by the sensation. And then all processing going on within those areas ultimately create a response, some of which is then sent to the association area of the frontal cortex to do a motor response, for example, and then, you know, for processing and motor execution. Do you start to see how the pathways could work in a way around the head? Each area in the brain does have specific function, although the coolest thing is that, we talked about that, if some doesn't work, you can actually create neuroplasticity. So the visual cortex can be taken up with tactile information if somebody's blind and is not used for that. Yeah, no, it's way smarter. It's multitasking, or it's helping each other out in there. It's not like a lot of us. What general function do the primary cortices of the occipital and temporal lobes possess? See? And here. There you go. So that's right here. The visual is so it's like a movie. You see with the eyes and it projects to the back. That's how I remember that. That's why we see. And then the hearing is right behind the ear. That helps. It's right there. So the motor execution, general sensation, hearing, vision. So that gives us that. And we also have we have a gustatory cortex, that's also in the parietal. That would be taste. We have olfactory. We'll talk about the olfactory. That's really cool. And then here we can see we got the first information goes to the postcentral gyrus, let's say the touch or the pain. And then it transfers the information further back to integrate it. There's a difference between sensation and perception. You sense something and perceive, you interpret it. What does it mean? Because That becomes important in Buddhism, right? You twist your ankle. What does it mean you twist your ankle? It hurt. The pain of twisting the ankle hurt. That's one pain. That pain you can't do too much about. It happened already. The pain you get from cursing yourself out that you're so dumb that you twisted your ankle. That pain we can avoid. That's the second dart. In Buddhism they call the first dart and the second dart. The first dart you can't do anything, it hits you. The second dart you can avoid. How you look at it. It's very interesting. Buddhism is very interesting that way. It works very well with this how the brain works thinking. That's one reason why I like it. I mean that part of it at least. And so that's the arrows, and then we think, oh, whatever is happening, I need to do something. Then we get this area involved, which is the thinking of what to do. And then the last step is the execution. And that's the primary area. So the primary area is an execution or a primary reception area. And then the association areas are the integration centers of whatever that stimulus is. Good. And then we have more. The hidden lobe, the one that's like an island. What, tell me something? No. It's on the side of the brain. The insula has a few functions associated with it. Can you pick the ones from the list below here?
Awareness of balance and
Awareness.
self-awareness.
And self-awareness. So that's kind of interesting, the self-awareness thing. And then where's the primary? It is also where the primary vestibular cortex lies. What is its function? Oh, that's the balance. We already know. Duh. I know, I'll get better at that format at some point, hopefully next year. The superficial cortex, where most cell bodies lie and integrate information. Most deeper structures are pathways connecting those integrating cells with one another. Some neural cell bodies, however, cluster within the deep brain. We generally call them nuclei. All right, so when you see a nuclei, a structure like basal nuclei, that's cell bodies within the deep brain where we basically have only pathways. One of them concerns itself with bodily movement. Movement patterns are stored here. Remember when you learned how to drive, you had to pay full attention to every detail, gas pedal, clutch, etc. Now, never mind, you can drink coffee and do not text. I should show the video of the texting accident that I had. Yeah, I'll pull it up. Oh, it's on the phone. I'll pull it up later. Anyway, what is the structure called where all those automated movement patterns are located? Just mentioned. Basal ganglia or basal nuclei. So this is the thing. A ganglia is a cluster of cell bodies outside the nervous system. So a ganglia is cell body cluster. You want to have cluster cell bodies of nerve cell bodies outside the central nervous system because it's dangerous out there. You've got to be in numbers. Cell body cluster outside CNS. Well, that actually nerve cell bodies, I should say. Yes, Samantha?
I put that as I was wrong.
We'll check on that. Did you do? Yeah, I tried to get the small lowercase spelling, capital spelling, and then capital lowercase. So we'll see.
I put it the same way both times. I didn't check.
Okay, we'll catch me afterwards. We'll make sure in the background I can look. Some of the stuff I'm not sure if the system picking everything up, but I want to make sure I eliminate all my mistakes. Okay, and so that's the ganglia is that definition. Nuclei is the same thing, but inside the CNS, the central nervous system. So by that definition, this name is wrong. You get that? No. By that definition, this is wrong. This should be called basal nuclei, not basal ganglia. Because a nuclei is a cell bodies inside the nervous system, the CNS, not outside, which is a ganglia. And so in the old days, they mixed stuff around. Now they have this language straight. So basal ganglia sometimes is also called basal nuclei. And I would assume in this future, more and more, it's going to be called basal nuclei. So that's why it's both names. I put it up so you gotta learn the definition, because it's good to know those. It's good to know those definitions because, you know, a lot of questions come from them. And actually, I was cleaning up at home, found some books. This is a really good book, The Dictionary of Word Roots and Combining Forms. It's like a few bucks. So that's like basically all the prefixes and suffixes. You don't understand something, you look it up in here. This should be accompanied from all the, you know, for all the textbooks, I think, in the back. You should have something like that. Helps out a lot. I try to bring the ones in here that I feel are relevant. All right, so let's see. What time is it?
6:55.
Should we do a little more or should we don't do a little? You have a little more going?
Well, you have 11 more questions.
Well, I know, but I got Monday as well.
Oh, we're doing lab today, right?
No, we're doing lab there today, but we're going to do lab on Monday and the dissection on Monday. So let's keep a little bit more going so you have a little more time for Monday's lab and integrate, because I want to make sure now we're going to do lab stuff again more. So we're going to focus on that. Okay, so let's see. We did this, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, evolutionary speaking, now we get into the good stuff. That's good we're doing that. You know that nifty thing God created to help, oh no, never mind. You know that was one of my attempts to not have the creationists be mad because I say evolution. You got that, right? Because I had this patient in my office and he says, what do you think? How perfect is the body? I said, well, it comes in layers. It's pretty all right. He's like, oh no, let me tell you. It's perfect. The next day he brought me a booklet about you know, the spells evolution. I read the booklet and you're like a comment like, dude, you don't, no, it's all the same. Evolution is the God's way to the creator's name to adapt to an ever-changing life form. It's the same thing. And he's like, oh no, you're wrong. I was like, okay, we're done. I don't know what to say. So anyway, but when we look at evolutionary speaking, animals, smell is very important to understand the outside world, especially if the vision is not that great. And so we used smell early on heavily to detect danger and also more pleasant things. And we still, from this day, process smell different than other sensory inputs. Smell bypasses the filter, which is the thalamus, which we'll get to, and goes straight to our emotional brain. That's why if you walk into a toilet and somebody just pooped, it pisses you off. Or you walk through a rose field and you better stop and smell the roses when you get by them, because it's going to make you happy. So olfaction, smelling, is very, very powerful for us. What do we call the brain? The part of the brain that deals with our emotions. Limbic system. One of my favorites. So you got the limbic system, you got the olfactory cortex. Olfaction means smell. And then lies in an area called the locus, that's fine. But then that connects straight with the limbic system that evaluates our experiences affectively based on our feelings. God, I have a really big one of that. Just ask my partner. The emotional brain is where we process feeling, have emotions, reactions. A very important pathway within it is the one that gets activated when we freak out or lose it. The amygdala is a structure that is heavily responsible for how we assess danger. And then it is where we react to fear. It's where much of our automatic reactivity and outbursts come from. Remember last time you had a tantrum? Yeah, mine wasn't that long ago. We could call it an amygdala hijack. The amygdala works unconsciously, that is outside of our control of being able to think about the danger nor influence how we react to it. Many of us live large parts of our life in this mental prison. where we react to things but have no control over what it is going on. So this is very important to understand that. It's unconscious, and it just happens. If we want to be more in control of our reactions, we have to figure out how to make them more conscious. We have to stimulate pathways that bring the experience more into the frontal cortex, where we can consciously and hopefully more realistically and rationally assess the situation before we kick somebody's butt and get shot or some weird stuff. Mm-hmm. So this is like, I read this book once, and this is where this guy said, when you get a freak attack, it's like, oh my God, and you freak out, you can't. And then you say, oh Jesus, and you start getting more conscious, and you start asking questions of how to bring it more into the forehead. What you make the problem comes to your amygdala, it's unsolvably big. It's this ginormous life or death feeling. And we have to talk the brain down from that. We have to understand we are not our brain. There is a conscious part of the brain that's right here, and the rest is unconscious. Thank God you don't have to think about everything. All of those heart rates and breathing things and all that stuff. But also a lot of the emotions, a lot of the reactivity is unconscious, and we have to learn how, or we don't have to, but it helps a lot of us to learn how to get it more into the consciousness. The amygdala also sends signals to another structure that is going to involve the autonomic nervous system and the hormonal endocrine system, which then tell the whole body about the danger the brain experiences and prepare to deal with it. Okay. So that's why, a brain that is under real and perceived continued threat will keep the entire body constantly alert, which over time will wear it out, and we develop what is called psychosomatic illness. That's very important. It's not even that important that the threat is always there. It's how we react to it. And that's where, it gets very heavily. If you had a hard time growing up, and it's harder to not have these reactions. It's very important to know about it, but it's very hard to work on it, and we need a lot of help, and that's okay. But we don't need we can do it all ourselves. That's the challenge. And the challenge is also the psychosomatic illness, and this is then why the body gets sick over time. This is why calming the mind and learning realistic threat assessment helps the body be healthier. I know, there's a lot of info, but it's very important info. And this is why I think meditation, for example, is very helpful, or mindfulness stuff.
Yeah, mindfulness. There's also, have you heard of DBT therapy? Dialectical behavioral therapy. It's really good for like dysregulation and the limbic system.
Yeah, my therapist always tries to keep me in the zone and figure out how not to get out of the zone.
Uses mindfulness to.
Mm-hmm. No, it's great. Yeah, it's great. So anything mindfulness, anything smell the flowers, anything increasing the gratitude pathways will help.
Yeah.
Or having a loving relation with ourselves. So stop beating ourselves up. So where's the question here? What is the structure that connects the emotional brain to the body? We talked about it in the endocrine system. The hypothalamus? Yes. Amygdala hijack? Oh, hippocampus. We've got to talk about the hippocampus too. And there's the hypothalamus. So that's the connection. There's a couple of writings on it. But it's a tiny little thing. But it's a huge, huge action in that thing. Good. Another interesting structure that lies within the emotional brain has to do with long-term memory. That place where you like to store all that anatomical information. That is so interesting. Working memory, which we use to solve problems, is located in the frontal cortex. So when we solve the math problems in the frontal cortex, we're thinking them. Once we solve a problem and understand the concept of the nerve impulse or the heart thing, once we get that, we want to commit it to memory. The information has to be transferred to another structure, which is located in the temporal lobe, release the ear, blah, blah, blah. The way that we create this memory is by repeatedly stimulating the pathway. That's why I advocate flashcards and retrieval exercises. Because when you have to think about something the pathway gets stimulated when you get to the solution. That's why the thinking is a little painful, and then it's a joy when you find, I mean, a little bit of a joy when you find a solution. And the more we do that, the stronger a pathway becomes, and the more we know that situation. That's why you have the flashcard, you repeat the stuff you haven't put as strong to memory yet. You don't repeat the stuff you already got in memory, because for me, that stuff just makes me fall asleep if it's already there. Blah, 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 blah. What area am I looking for? Hippocampus, like hippopotamus. Hippocampus. And hippocampus, and that is right here. And the memorization, the memory problem, making a memory is called frequent stimulation of neural pathway strengths. A long-term is called long-term potentiation. It's a reverberating circuit. So that's the when 1-5s and X5s, this is like you solve the problem. And then you do the flashcard, you solve the concept, you understand the concept, then you put that understanding into the card, and then you repeat it, and all of a sudden these neurons fire back to the previous neurons and make everything stronger. And if you look at the world like you're pissed off all the time, and the glass is always half empty, that is a very strong half-empty world-making situation. And depression falls right after that. And if you do the opposite, like again, it's not always easy. You have to stay authentic. You can't just fake it. But we have to work on it. And if we strengthen the other one, the more gratitude pathways and stuff like that, then we have much more an easier time and are less overwhelmed. And the interesting thing also is when you are depressed, it's really hard that the hippocampus functions. When we're down, it's not working so well. It's hard to study. That's why. And when we're not down, when we're up, the hippocampus is the one place in the brain that makes nerve cells, makes new cells. But not when we're depressed. Apparently. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I got out of this situation. And this, we all know this, the procrastination, right? So that procrastination, like the frontal cortex is like, I should do this, I should do this, I should do this. And the side goes like, I don't feel like it. The limbic system's like, next time. And then we'll stop for that tomorrow. All right, so that's to me, that's probably one of the most important things. 13, hippocampus. And then lastly, another structure, another named gyrus that is active when we use gestures to express our emotions, like the Italians do, you know, right, Karen? Oh. Moving the arms around when we speak. What is that cortex called? Cingulate gyrus. And that's the cingulate gyrus right here by the corpus callosum, close to the corpus callosum. If we look at here, you see the corpus callosum is the white one, and then the orange one is right around it, that's the cingulate gyrus. Part of it, limbic cortex in there. Okay. I talked about this. This just talks about getting conscious. You know, oh, I can't handle it. It's too much for me. And then we got to talk to the brain. And it's really a helpful concept. I mean, understanding the concept that you are not your brain is research out of UCLA. They wrote a book, You're Not Your Brain. Very good book.
That's the name of the book?
Mm-hmm. And apparently, and it comes with some instruction, I think a CD probably, but they shown in research that obsessive behavior went down the same amount as medication just with that knowledge and with applying that knowledge. We're like, you know, we don't have to keep the... It's hard though. I wake up in the middle of the night. I can't go back to sleep because the brain starts thinking. So we, you know, it's not, I'm not saying it's an easy task, but I want to teach you what I know about it to hopefully help a little bit with some of the problems if we have those problems. I think I'm just talking to myself. Okay, I think this is where we should stop.